Balance is a contentious topic in the Battle Cats. After all, anyone who pays attention to the meta will likely say that many units are OP and that the balance of the game is in ruin. However, while it is indeed true that modern units are very powerful and debatably OP, but they are also balanced. See, the word balance has very different meanings in the context of English and in game design. According to Cambridge Dictionary, balance means a situation where different things are given equal importance, or are considered or divided equally or fairly. This would imply approximately equal power level across all possible options, and that's what most people mean when they say balance. But a game designer's job isn't to make something balanced, it's to make something fun. While fun and balance usually have some level of correlation, they are not identical. To do this, they aim for a specific power level and then balance it until it reaches that intended power level. By that definition, Dark Lunos is completely balanced, since it was intended to be completely overpowered as a rare reward for gambling on a rare banner, as is the case for most Festubers. In fact, it's much more important for a game to have identity and to be fun than to be balanced. Now, if you've read the title and thumbnail, you might be confused as to why I spent this first paragraph talking about something overpowered. Well, that's because it illustrates a chasm between the minds of the developers and players. And if you want to truly understand why PONOS chooses to do something, you need to get into their headspace. And so, why being good isn't always important. Also known as the Ururun Theorem. Before I continue, I must first clarify that I am not a professional game designer, nor am I studying to become one. This is purely a personal area of interest, and if an actual professional can come and confirm what I say or clarify any misunderstandings I have, that would be great. To get into the perspective of the developers, I must first obliterate any and all notion that PONOS has absolutely no clue of what they're doing. They're not perfect, but they're also not completely stupid, and they do things with intent. As proof, I have two clear examples of mechanics that they've clearly learned from their mistakes and actively learned from them. In chronological order, Aku shields are way better implemented than starred alien barriers. Both of them block all damage and CC while active, and can be broken with brute force or their respective counter ability. However, the two key differences are that starred alien barriers need to be broken in one hit, whereas Aku shield can be chipped down over multiple hits, and starred alien barriers do not regenerate, while Aku shields will regenerate at a set percentage of the original amount every knockback. You probably understand immediately why shields are better implemented than barriers, especially if you've watched Canned Juice's video about it forever ago. But what is less discussed is that only one update after starred aliens and barriers dropped, Fencer Cat dropped. His force swing is very long, but it is a guaranteed break at a pretty solid range, which is still pretty reliable. On top of this, since barriers don't regenerate, Fencer can quite easily break it, then after that, the mechanic can be basically ignored. So when making Aku shields, they don't make any non-uber guaranteed shield piercing units, even now, and the shield also regenerates, so you actually have to engage with the mechanic. The second example is that sages are much better implemented than behemoths. I discussed this in a past video, but the relevant part is that sages, their debuff resistances, and Sage Slayer are much better implemented than Behemoth's, their debuff immunities, and Behemoth Slayers. If you want more info, you can check out that video, though be warned about the audio quality. Games are carefully designed with intent, and almost every choice has a lot of reason as to why they made that choice. And to write it all off as PONOS doesn't know what they're doing is disingenuous. Again, they're not infallible, but they do things with intent. And now that this is clarified, I can now actually get to the main topic. Ururun Wolf is the first legend cat you get while clearing Stories of Legend. Ururun nowadays is known as a fairly solid generic backliner, and is often used as a measuring stick to judge backline Ubers against. However, that is her modern day reputation. If we're gonna understand design intent, then you have to consider the developer's headspace during that time. This matters because Ururun was added in version 2.3.1 in July 2014, almost 12 years ago. The meta was way different than what it is today. We're talking the era when Valkyrie was considered good, Oda Nobunaga was the best anti-Black Uber, Keiji didn't have Strengthen because Strengthen didn't exist yet. During that era, her stats are way better by comparison. But honestly, that doesn't really matter. The thing is, no matter how good or bad she was, Ururun was always gonna serve a crucial role in the game. What's more important than the meta at the time is the community at the time, or to be precise, the lack thereof. Consider this. At the time, this was indeed a tiny game. The late game is cyclones and crazed cats, and nowadays we consider that to be the tutorial stage. I mean, this is a mobile game aimed at children. Children may talk to their friends at school about it, but children aren't exactly known for coming up with coherent strategies on their own. And for the adults playing this is probably just something you randomly play on your phone when you're bored on lunch break or something just to kill time. Not many would really look deeper into it, and there's barely any documentation about the game at all. This is to say that you're quite unlikely to bother doing Stories of Legend, since there's basically no incentive to do so, and nothing even tells you that Stories of Legend even exists, until Ururun Wolf was added. Now, when you enter the Legend Stages menu after clearing EOC, a silhouette will appear and tell you to clear the Great Escaper to unlock Ururun Wolf. Again, in the absence of external resources, this is the only thing that tells the player that Stories of Legend exists at all, and that it's a thing that the player should go play. Ururun's actual power level, then, is irrelevant. See, the Great Escaper is a pretty challenging stage, especially at the time. With Ururun serving as a powerful enemy backliner, Ururun will develop an impression of power amongst the player base. And then even after beating it the first time, you'll then have to beat it again with a treachery radar or just get lucky in obtaining the unit. Remember, this is an era before gold CPU skip, way before that. Point is, Ururun is pretty difficult to get, especially without external help. This means that as long as Ururun is above a certain baseline of power, we're talking like little Nyandam power level, most players will perceive her as powerful even if she isn't actually powerful. And this role of telling the player that Stories of Legend exists and telling them to continue playing it is incredibly important, especially during that era. These kinds of units that serve a primary function outside of use as a playable unit are quite rare in gaming in general, and especially in the Battle Cats, as a live service gacha game with basically no other gameplay outside of combat. For examples in other games, Contest Pikachu from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is horrible in combat for the point of the game that you get them, but it works really well in contests, which is an alternate game mode. Oliver from Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is awful as a battler, but obtaining him acts as a skip for his boss fight if the given condition is met. Dan Hibiki from Street Fighter was originally created to engage with some friendly trolling with rival SNK's Art of Fighting. Announced Darkness in Hearthstone was added to screw around with random generation effects. You get the idea. But like I said, the Battle Cats is kind of refined in a way. There's no side gameplay like Horace's contests. There aren't any random shenanigans in the same way that Hearthstone has. They don't even have a rival to engage with some friendly trolling with. So for the most part, this is extremely theatrical, but it's fun knowledge to have anyway, and it's an interesting thing to discuss. That said, I will go over one more example, though it's not really a single example per se, and that would be the Nekolugas. Now, the Nekolugas has had a reputation of being the worst banner in the game, by a huge margin, and is only recently facing some competition from Pixies in an endgame context. Most of these units are slow super backliner support units that have low damage output, low health, 1 knockback, god-awful cooldown, but interesting support abilities that target almost all traits, or damage output that targets no traits. These units are not generally considered good, but in exchange, they are really memorable. Their names are not that easy to remember, especially if you don't know what their names mean in Japanese, but they stick out. In a game with a ton of Ubers, these units really stand out as some of the most strange, most unique ones. And ultimately, strangeness is a big part of the appeal of this game in the first place. It's in the marketing and everything. So despite their generally weaker power level, these units are some of the most memorable, most interesting units in the game. And frankly, when there are so many units, having units be distinct is far more important than having a theoretically balanced metagame, especially in a purely single-player game when you don't have to consider the opponent's perspective. That's about all for this video. This is even more theatrical than my previous few, and it's much more for discussion than to apply in the actual game. Again, if a real game designer can come and confirm or deny what I say, please do. It's also a much shorter one on account of I don't really have much more time, and I'll explain that in the channel update that has either already come out or will come out very soon by the time you see this. Right, in any case, hope you enjoyed, and until next time, don't die.